Hi, my name is Asata. I'm a medical illustrator here with Legacy Bio Studios. I'm also the owner. And welcome to the Bio Studio, which is a fancy term for my basement. It's my office in my basement. Anyways, today I want to talk about marketing and medicine, and we'll get into that. And I'm also probably going to hit a lot of other random topics. So in editing, I'll probably try to do some, label it out or something. I'm going to try to organize it. I realize I'm not a very organized person as a general rule when I'm just kind of like, I should have probably written a script for this in hindsight. But I'm already too deep into it. So we're going to just roll with it and see how it goes. What I wanted to talk about today was marketing and medicine. I was watching a YouTube video, a TED Talk by Rory Sutherland, and he's in advertisement. He's an ad man. And I began reflecting on how I've started targeting or how I've started tackling marketing and medicine. And when I say medicine, I'm talking less like pharmaceuticals. I feel like we've all seen the advertisement in pharmaceutical medicine. We all see the ads on TV of I don't know. I think the big ones that I've seen a lot right now are for Keytruda, Cialis, cancer, and ED. Those seem to be the big ones. I don't really work in pharmaceuticals, at least not right now. So that's not really what I'm thinking about. When I'm thinking about marketing and medicine, I'm thinking more along the lines of public health education, health literacy, projects of that topic. As you can see, I've got my Black maternity healthcare posters up. They got turned into a lookbook. The lookbook is in a different video. I can link it below and you can go and check it out and see what's in the lookbook, and you can kind of hear a little bit about how the lookbook came to be. But I wanted to talk more about, in general, marketing, because as a medical illustrator, I think we get so caught on this idea of we're creating technical illustrations for use. And in most cases, I would say that's accurate. I've done surgical illustrations for surgeons that are had essentially made a new device, and they were like, this is the device. I just want them to know how it works, what's new about it, what's interesting about it, get a general idea of the dimension and size, and a progress illustration of how it's used. And that's pretty straightforward. Line drawings, pretty easy. However, with public health and health literacy, you then have this different situation of, it's not providers that are trying to share information with other providers. It's providers or somebody that's working in public health trying to get information out to people that have pretty much none, if any, education in things like medicine, nutrition, information about their body, whether you're talking about anatomy or understanding things like what's a cold, flu viruses versus bacterial infections, what that looks like, what different treatments are needed, When do you need to go to emergency versus urgent care? And then you have within that group people that just don't trust the medical system. And so you're then trying to get information out to them, trying to say, hey, we're trustworthy individuals. We want you to be healthy. We're trying to give you information so that you can do right for yourself and provide for yourself. And all of that kind of leads into the fact that you have to market these things to them. You have to market these materials with the understanding that these are people that may just not want it. They don't see the value of it. They don't see the importance of it. They don't necessarily know that this has information that is in fact actually very important for them. So with that in mind, I also kind of am taking this perspective of, if I'm going to create something for public consumption, I want to make sure that I really understand the audience. And what does that mean? Like, okay, understand the audience. Who are you marketing to? Kind of, yeah. Like, if I'm doing something regarding, for example, right now, there has been an increase of cancers in the state that I live in, and particularly in prostate cancer. And the thing about it is prostate cancer is very treatable. It's very treatable. And if you catch it early, if you do your practices for early detection, almost 100% remission on it. Like, prostate cancer, if detected early, is a treatable cancer. It's one of the most treatable cancers. But men, particularly Black men, are not doing the things in order to have those early detections. So they're not learning about their cancer until it's already so far gone that it's probably stage 3, stage 4. And then you're no longer just treating your prostate. You are trying to treat the prostate plus wherever it's gone, in the colon, in the pancreas, in the lungs, in the brain, wherever. And cancers can spread everywhere in the body. So how do we market to individuals like that? That's something I've been actually really thinking about, because I partnered with Johnson and Lynn County. How do I convince Black men to take this survey? And they don't want to take the survey, even though the information that's in the survey could very well save their lives. There's information in there that I didn't even know. So my mom passed away from breast cancer. I didn't realize that if you're a man and you had breast cancer in your history, that increases your risk for prostate cancer. I didn't know that. So if I was a man, I'm still high risk for cancer. It's just not breast cancer. It's prostate cancer. And I, as the person that I am that has my experience in medicine and in cancer patient advocacy, would very much go ahead and be like, yeah, we're going to do the actions for early detection. We're going to go to the doctor. We're going to ask the questions. We're going to get set up with an oncologist. And me, as a woman, I go in every 6 months now to get scans of my breasts. Once a year, I go for a MRI. A CT scan. And once a year, I go in for a mammogram. So every 6 months, I'm getting scanned. And I will be doing that for the rest of my life. Hopefully that will allow me to have, to detect anything if I do develop breast cancer. And hopefully that will give me the opportunity to fight it and save my life. But as a man, how do you convey that same level of urgency to go to your oncologist, to go to the doctor, to get an oncologist, to do all of those things, to go through those early detective measures? Because I guarantee people don't want to die. People don't want to die. They don't want to die of cancer. But how do you convince them that this information and these choices are good for them? That's kind of this, it's on the same concept as the Black maternity posters that I created, where I was wanting to have information for Black mothers. So obviously I put Black women on the posters, and I have them in different shades of black and brown. I wanted them to feel seen. That's all I really want to do when I'm illustrating, is I want to make sure that the people that I'm illustrating for are feeling seen. Because for so long, we as Black people have had to look at posters featuring white individuals and try to associate it with our own bodies. And I don't want people that look like me to have to go through that anymore. So I started illustrating Black people. But I don't know if that's enough. That's the thing, is just because you've done this thing and it makes you feel good, I feel good about it, I still don't know if it's enough to actually convince somebody to go see a doctor. And that's a kind of another end of it, is when people go to their doctors, whether you're talking about somebody that's going for an annual routine checkup, has a primary care provider. They go in, they do their blood draw, they get their basic tests, and then, it's on the record of, oh, yeah, they went, they came in, these are what their labs came back as. They're healthy, or, hey, these things got flagged. We should send them over to, I don't know. Anything can get flagged. But I think that there is this feeling that sometimes when you're going to the doctor, they don't care about you. And I've felt that too. Like, I felt that going in to see a provider, and it feels like you're just their job. You're not a person. They don't really care why you're there. They ask you what your symptoms are or if you're having any problems, and they just kind of look at you and go, well, it's probably nothing. It'll go away on its own, or it's probably related to your cycle. Because I'm a woman, that's usually the first thing they ask is, when was your last period, and how's your cycle been? And then it's just like, oh, okay, well, that's pretty normal. It's normal for women to have painful cycles. Anything I ask beyond that, it can feel like they're just kind of being like, oh, this girl, she keeps asking more questions, get out, And so when that happens, when you're in those positions where you're going in and you're trying to learn and understand, and maybe you feel like you're annoying your physician, or you feel like you don't know how to ask the right questions, so you just kind of let things go. That in itself it's hard to combat that. As an illustrator, trying to create content for these groups of people that maybe haven't been treated very well by medical professionals, by the medical system. They might have a mistrust of the medical system. I myself come from a family that we do not go to doctors. I would say that I am the first generation within my family line that goes for annual checkups. My dad refuses to go to annual checkups. As a black man from the South, he's not going to annual checkups. It wasn't until he had his stroke. I was going to say his first stroke, but he's only had one. I'm hoping he only has one stroke. It was when he had his stroke that he started going for annual checkups. And it was because he had a stroke. And even then, he goes, he sits, he's not really talking with the provider. He's mostly just listening, and they usually go through the usual stuff about his eating habits, his sleeping habits. Is he taking care of himself? Is he getting enough exercise? Things of that matter. They draw blood. They do their checks to make sure that his kidneys are functioning and that, his nutrition levels are okay. He doesn't have too much sodium or potassium or not enough or whatever. But then he comes home and he's like, ugh, doctors, whatever. What do they know? Whatever. And I get that because he grew up in an environment where doctors would do shady stuff to black men. So I definitely get it. And I'm not going to try and lecture him about the importance of taking his doctor seriously and, following all the things that they tell him to, because it's falling on deaf ears. What's the point? It's a waste of my time. It's a waste of his time. I know it's annoying him. It's better for me and him to have a relationship where he feels comfortable telling me when he's not feeling so good or when something's concerning him, and to feel confident that I'm not going to just sit there and go, you should go to the doctor about that, and actually listen to him and say, hey, have you checked your sugars lately? Maybe that's something we should take a look at. Have you been eating well? What have you been eating every day? Have you been drinking water? Doing our own check-in to make sure that he's doing the things that he needs to do in order to be healthy and keep him out of the emergency room. And I think that a lot of black and brown families probably experience really similar things where you have the younger generation trying to take care of their parents, trying to give them information and not push them too much, but to just, enough where they're going to be taking care of themselves and taking their health literacy or their health seriously. But it still does come back to there's just not that level of trust and comfort that you really want between these groups of people and the medical providers serving them. I mean, a part of being an illustrator for me now is also trying to fill that gap somehow, trying to provide materials that are pretty, they're accurate, but also are about saying, I see you, and I'm trying to bring you a level of comfort. I'm trying to show you that you're not alone, that if it's a serious something, that I'm trying to give you as much information as possible in a way that won't overwhelm you so that you'll be ready and you're going to be prepared. And the reason that that's so important to me is because I saw that with my own mother. So when she had been diagnosed with her cancer, they gave her this So You Have Cancer book, and that thing was thick. It was thick. It was, I don't know, maybe an inch and a half thick, and paperback. So it wasn't even the hardcover was what made it thick. It was a paperback. And it was a pink book. It was aesthetic. It was pretty. It was on brand with the hospital that provided it to her. And I honestly, when it first showed up in the house, I was like, not my business. That's yours. I especially because at the time my mom was very private about her diagnosis, and I could tell that she was in that stage of I don't want to bother anybody. And I didn't want to push her, so I left it alone. But I came home one day, came to my mom's home, and came in the front door, and I was, let them know I was there. It was like, hello, I'm here. And my mom was in the kitchen, and I took myself into the living room because I was going to drop off my stuff and go and greet her properly. And this book is kind of just chucked, like thrown into the middle of the room. And it was pretty obvious it had been disposed of in anger. And I went to go pick it up, flipped through it. I was, curious, why is this book on the floor? What angered who? And what was I walking into? And flipping through the book, pretty. It was pretty. Line drawings, shaded drawings, all of them vector illustrations, so there wasn't a whole lot of detail. The bodies were very elegant and graceful looking. Not bodies, you know what I'm saying? Like, you weren't seeing the true shape of a person, the true shape of breasts, or of hips, or like anything. Like, it was just beautiful curves, lines and curves. And at the time, I didn't realize how that was upsetting my mom. And I look back and I go, ugh, you dummy. You should have known. You should have known, but I didn't. And I decided, no, we need to talk about this because something has upset you and I don't want you upset. So please tell me so we can fix this. Whatever it is, I can fix it. And that was the first time that my mom and I actually talked about her diagnosis. We talked about what was happening, what she was being told in her oncology appointments. And at that point in her treatment plan, it was very much, hey, we're just going to have you start doing infusions and blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to have you go in for surgery and we're going to remove the lump. They wanted to do a lumpectomy. And my mother was very aggressively wanting a mastectomy. And in all honesty, she wanted bilateral. She wanted both breasts removed in the same surgery. She was like, I just don't want to deal with it. I just want both of them gone. No lumpectomy, just take the entire breast. And honestly, that would have probably been the best option. I realize that oncologists have their trainings, they have their routines, they have their systems that they want to follow. But, and that was the other thing, was we weren't given a proper diagnosis until much later from a different doctor who wasn't even an oncologist. He was a surgeon. Because the oncologists that we were previously working with seemed to always be evading the question of what type of breast cancer. They just kept saying it was breast cancer. When we went to a different hospital and we were like, we need surgery now, like yesterday, like a month ago, which that's a whole story. And I've been trying to like put together a recording of what I was doing for 4 years as a cancer patient advocate. It's been hard because it's kind of like rehashing and reopening those wounds for me, because, you know, it was a lot of effort and time and heartbreak. Frustrating time, to say the least. It was a very disappointing time. It was one of those things, I kept telling people, it's like when you keep getting bad luck and you go, oh, such bad luck. But then they like doctors would be like, oh, but we can fix it. And then you're like, oh, how lucky, you know? Like, it was like I had good luck and bad luck. But yeah, when my mom was going through her initial diagnosis and getting the information about like what's the plan, what were we gonna do, what's what, they just gave her this book. And I realized that, you know, you're trying to get a lot of information to an individual in a 20-minute, maybe not even 20-minute visit, maybe more like 15-minute visit, which is ridiculous because half the time you'd be sitting there for a half hour waiting for your oncologist to come in. And they just give you 15 minutes and be like, here's the next step, blah, blah, blah. Okay, bye. So this book, right? We're back to the book. I feel like I keep getting distracted trying to give context, and I will at some point get together a video explaining my experience as a cancer patient advocate, because I do think it's important. It has affected how I illustrate now. It has affected what I do and how I do it. It's given me a lot to think about, and that's not a bad thing. You know, it's a good thing. It's just one of those things where sometimes you look at something and you go, I wish I could have learned this in a much less painful way. But it is what it is. So the cancer book, back to the cancer book. I brought it up to my mom and was like, what's going on? Just let me know. And the way my mom just kind of like crumpled, it was hard. It was hard to see, but it was an important conversation. And this conversation, I swear, this conversation changed the trajectory of me, my career as an illustrator. It changed how I looked at my job. And it made me realize that my job, the job of a medical illustrator, is so important. And that when we don't do a good job, it's not just those illustrations were kind of, It's truly a disservice to the people that we're trying to serve. It's a letdown to the people that we're trying to provide information to. And that, to me, I'm not okay with. The idea of somebody, a client, spending a lot of money to have custom illustrations made, and then for those illustrations to, at best case, if it doesn't go over well, not being understood, and that pamphlet or that book or whatever it is being discarded. Worst case, upsetting somebody and making them feel unprepared, unseen, undervalued. And that was what my mom was feeling. Because in the books, they were so tidy that my mom felt like she wasn't seeing the reality of what was going to happen to her. She wanted to see the truth of what fighting cancer was going to look like. She wanted to know what her scars would look like. She wanted to know what the surgeries were going to be. She wanted to know what the results of the chemo could be. She wanted as much information as she could to prepare herself. Because to my mom, she felt like she was going to war with her body. And she kind of was. Her body was trying to kill her. And she was trying to kill the thing that was trying to kill her inside her body. So yeah, she was going to war, and she wanted a proper tactical plan. And what she got was beautiful illustrations that gave her no real information. It told her where incisions would be made, yes. It told her that lumps would be removed, sure. It told her that she was going to be having to do, post-operative care. Okay. But it didn't really explain to her what that meant. And one of the things that I had noticed that I realized and I felt ashamed about is whenever I was talking to somebody about healthcare or about medicine or nutrition, I was talking about it from the perspective of this is what your provider is going to tell you, not from the perspective of this is the way to try and understand what the provider is telling you. And these are questions in order to help you ask for more clarity in what your provider is trying to tell you. And most importantly, and I think this is like the biggest thing, because I feel like there's a point in our lives where we stop asking, can you explain that? I don't understand, because we don't want people to think we're stupid. It's totally okay to ask, what is that? I have no idea. Can you give me the basic, like 101, like explain to me like I'm 10, because I don't know what that is. And that, that's valid because you didn't go to medical school, right? You're a regular person just going to the doctor, trying to get information because maybe you're in pain. Maybe you're just doing your annual checkup and they asked a question and you were trying to respond to it. It's okay to be like, I don't know what hypertension is. I don't know what diabetes is. I don't know what cancer is actually, like, what does that mean? What does that mean for me? What does that mean to my body? What's happening in here? What is cancer? What is diabetes? It's okay to ask. It's okay to ask. And that was the moment where I was like, oh my God, we aren't comfortable to ask these questions. My mom is frustrated because she doesn't understand. She tried to ask questions. They gave her this book. It didn't explain it to her. And now she's sitting back at square one going, I am so lost. I don't know what's happening and I am terrified. And I was not okay with that. that was kind of like the final straw. And that was the beginning of my journey as a cancer patient advocate. That also was the beginning of a later conversation that my mom and I had. And at this point, she had already gotten really sick with pneumonia. She had started her infusions. There was a failure with it was like, so it's called Lunesta, but it's like a injectable packet. Like they put the injectable in your arm, and it has a timer set to it where 24 hours after it's been attached to your arm, it's supposed to inject you with the Lunesta fluid instead of having to like go back to the infusion center and get an injection the next day. So they had, put one of these things on my mom. It failed to inject. It never injected. And Lunesta is supposed to help build up your T cells after your chemo treatment. So my mom had no T cells. She had no immune system. Meaning that any pathogen, anything in the air, anything that could cause the common cold, the flu, she was going to catch it, and she had nothing in her body to fight it off, so it was going to run rampant. So she probably caught a cold, and her body didn't see it, couldn't trigger anything to fight the flu, or the cold, couldn't fight the cold virus, and her lungs started to fill with fluid, and she developed pneumonia. And it was a bad pneumonia. It was really bad. So that sent her to the hospital. She was there for like 2 weeks. She was convinced she was going to die in there. And when she did finally get discharged and she went home, she was on a oxygen nose loop. So she was not really able to move around and do anything on her own. She was very weak. She wasn't breathing well on her own. And that was, I think, for her the first real moment of being like, I'm going to die. She took me aside and she was like, I need you to do me a favor. And I assumed it was, something about maybe her work or maybe about, family. And she was like, I need you to take some reference photos of me, of my cancer. And I would like you to turn them into some illustrations. And I want them to be real. I want your illustrations to look like a person. And that's what I do. I love illustrating in color. And I love creating realistic illustrations, anatomically correct, realistic illustrations. And of course, my mom asked me, she's really sick. Of course I'm going to do that for her. So I did. And that was a very hard moment for me because I was very intimately researching what was happening in her body. And I was drawing an illustration of what her cancer looked like inside her body, what she was going to probably look like after she had surgery, because we were planning a surgery for her at that point. And after you have a mastectomy, you have a port. So I also did an illustration of what that port placement, what that's looking like, what that does, where it goes, and what's outside the body, what's inside the body. And I shared it with her. She loved it. She cried. We had a moment. But I could tell that even though these illustrations were a more graphic illustration, it was more honest. And it made her feel comforted because it at least gave her a mental game plan. It helped mentally prepare her for what she was about to go through regarding the surgery. And she seemed to think it helped. So, of course, I was like, okay. I like it. Let's do this. Let's do more of it. That was kind of the first time I really realized that it's different to illustrate for people that are in medicine, that are practicing medicine, for people that are trying to share information to other people that, if they're not medical professionals, they are like well versed in that thing. They're specialized in it somehow. Making materials for someone that has no idea. Maybe it's the first time hearing a term, and all of a sudden they're supposed to become an expert because it's happening to their body, and they're at a point where they're like, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what to do. I can tell you this sucks, and I don't know what else to tell you about it. Making something for them, something that gives them the opportunity to slow down and go, this is what's happening to me. Okay. What now? What do I do with that? And I think that in itself, that opportunity to learn in a caring way can be the difference between somebody living or dying by something that they've been diagnosed with. Because it's going to be determine whether or not they're invested and interested in their own healthcare. Do they feel comfortable asking the questions? Do they feel like it is their place to ask the questions? And I think that is the biggest issue in a lot of clinical settings, is we have this idea that the doctor knows best, and to never question them, to never ask them questions, and to never go beyond what they just tell you. To just say, okay, the doctor is going to do what's best for me. They went to school for this. It's in their hands. I'm going to just try and do what they tell me. And I'm not... I realize I sound like I'm kind of like, don't listen to doctors. I'm not saying that. You should definitely at least listen to what your doctor says. But if it's something that you're not sure, or something just doesn't feel right to you, or you don't feel like you're really understanding, you can always go and get a second opinion. You can always go and get on Google and do some research on your own and try your best to get the foundational information. But that in itself is another thing, is knowing how to Google, knowing how to find the information that's accurate, that's correct, that's backed by quality institutions and research groups and stuff like that. That in itself is a skill. So even then, I know that a lot of times people will be like, why are you putting these booklets together? Or why are you doing this thing? People can just get on Google. Because there's a lot of misinformation on Google too. That in itself, to be able to Google and find accurate information, is also a skill set that not everybody has. And I don't feel like we should have to go through and like wade through nonsense in order to find accurate information so that we're able to go to our doctor's appointments and go, hey, so I read this thing. What can you tell me about that? Is that something that's I should be worried about because I have these symptoms and this seems to line up, and maybe this is, something that we should think about. Can you put it in my chart? I feel like I have really strayed from the original concept of advertisement, but these are all things that I'm thinking about when I'm putting together these lookbooks or these posters or anything else that I'm creating that's going to be shared with the public. Is I really do want us to have that conversation and that opportunity to look at things from the perspective of how can we best serve this to somebody in a way where they go, okay, yeah, I'm willing to listen. And like in the TED Talk, an example was, sorry, I'm pulling it up because I'm not great with remembering specifics, and I want to make sure that this is an accurate thing that I'm talking about. 18th century Prussia. Okay, so in this TED Talk, Rory talks about 18th century Prussia and how he wanted his population, his kingdom, the people he was ruling over, to eat potatoes. It's a starch. It would make it so that there wasn't so much demand on bread, and you would lower the risk of famine. Makes sense. But in Prussia, they thought potatoes were ugly, and they thought that they were not worth eating. They didn't want to eat them. The peasants didn't want to eat them. So what this king did was, I guess, he said, oh, the other thing was nobody wanted to grow them. The peasants didn't want to grow the potatoes because if nobody wants to eat them, you don't want to grow them, right? So what he did was he declared the potato as a royal vegetable and only the royal family could consume them. And he planted a royal potato patch. And he said to his guards, I want you to guard this potato patch day and night, but don't guard it well. And people know if something is worth guarding, it's worth stealing. So he was letting the peasants steal his potatoes. And then they had like an underground potato growing operation. So people were eating potatoes. The end goal was achieved of he wanted his people to eat potatoes. He wanted to have an alternative starch so that there would be less chance of a famine. And as Rory stated, he rebranded the potato. And so I guess that's kind of the whole thing about medicine and health literacy is I'm in this weird position where I feel like we've always had this idea that medicine is only for people that went to medical school and that understanding it is only for privileged individuals that had higher education. And learning about your body and learning about how it works and the things that can go wrong with it and how to protect it, that's for everybody. That's for everybody. I want there to be, I guess, kind of like a underground education about what your body does and how to protect it. And I'm hoping that will turn into more people being willing to say, hey, I just don't get this thing. Can you explain it to me? That's literally all I want people to do. At the end of the day, if somebody goes into their doctor and they're having a conversation and they're running up on minute 15 and they go, hey, pause. You said I have hypertension. I don't understand what that means. Please explain it. And can you explain what I can do besides just taking this pill? Can you explain like nutrition, exercise? Are those things that are going to help? You know, I think that is what the end goal is for me, to get people at that point. And let me tell you, being a patient advocate, you get really good at telling people, hey, pause. I'm not understanding that. Can you say that slower and explain it to me? And you do get to a point where you stop caring. Like I have had multiple individuals. I've had doctors, I've had nurses, I've had hospital staff roll their eyes at me, sigh at me, to feel like, oh, this woman is wasting my time. It's not wasting mine, because I'm at the end of the day, I want to understand. That's where I'm coming from. I want to understand. And I want more people to feel confident in being able to ignore the annoyance and be like, no, please explain this to me. I want your words to have substance, and they want them to have value, because I too want to live a long, healthy life. And I want to be able to do what you're telling me, plus follow through on my own end of things, so that I can do exactly that.